We had made money every year after 9/11 and had a very good record as far as airlines go in terms of success. But now we face a liquidity crisis that no one could have contemplated. I think one of the things I learned was the need to kind of communicate with people who may not be financially minded. I look at a set of financial statements and immediately they start to speak to me and tell me a story, and I don't understand why everybody else can't see the same story. Don't you see what's happening here? Everybody wants to understand how their business is doing.
Folks, welcome here to our next podcast with Orlando Impact. I'm so excited to have our next guest, Arne Haak, with us. We've met each other at several different occasions, mostly in the context of Arne making a great difference and impact into a local charity called Big Brothers and Big Sisters. But he's got quite an interesting background, and I'm so glad to have you, Arne. Welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
So, Arne, as I looked into your resume and read about your past and your career, tell us a little bit about just your story, maybe quickly, just from graduating. I see you're a Penn State graduate, you have an MBA, and then you got into the airline industry. And just give us a quick recap, if you would, about the last, say, 15 years in your career.
Okay. Well, it's funny. I'd be remiss to not start with the personal side of life. And that's, 30 years ago, I was lucky enough to meet a tremendous woman. And it took me 5 years, I joke, to get to fish in the boat, but she agreed to marry me. And so we've been married now 25 years. And for the last nearly 20 years now, I've been a father. And that's probably been the best career I've ever had, is to be a husband and a father. And those are the things that really, if you ask what fills your cup and makes you happy, those are the first things. That being said, I feel really blessed. I've had a very, I think, varied career, both in terms of industries and in terms of disciplines. I've spent the first, 20 years of my career in the airline industry. And then the last nearly 10 years now in the restaurant industry. And from an industry that's been interesting, and then from a discipline, the first 10 years were in pricing and revenue management, which was a marketing function. And then I kind of, you'll depend on who thinks which side is darker. Is marketing math darker, or is finance? But then the last 20 years in finance. And I guess I've been everything from a junior analyst to now, for the last 12 years, I've been a CFO of now 2 different public companies. And so that's been great. I've gotten to see both the top line and the costs. And it's both, I think, disciplines have been very interesting to me, because you get to see the entire enterprise and have a sense. You can't price a product until you understand the costs and what you're trying to cover. And at the same standpoint, that's kind of naturally led into finance, a career in finance.
Fantastic. I love what you were saying about prioritizing first to being father and being a husband. 25 years. Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you.
In today's environment, that's not an automatic. I think anybody's been married for longer than 20 years.
I think it's been harder for my wife than it has been for me.
You and me both, man. You and me both. So, Chief Financial Officer, when you entered into that position, and you've been a Chief Financial Officer for, if I heard you right, last 10 years, 2 organizations?
Yeah, since 2008. So 12 years. Yeah.
12 years. So in that role as CFO, what was maybe some of the bigger or biggest obstacles that you had to overcome?
That's a good question. I guess the first one comes very immediate. When I was promoted in 2008, it was in the heat of a fuel crisis, which really hurt the airlines. Oil prices had risen from maybe $60 a barrel to $100 a barrel within the course of 6 months. And before the commodity spike was done, it went to over $140 a barrel. And the company I was with was AirTran Airways. It was a successful low-cost airline. Southwest has now bought that airline, but we had made money every year after 9/11 and had a very good record as far as airlines go in terms of success. But now we face a liquidity crisis that no one could have contemplated, and that was probably one of the biggest challenges, was trying to get thrust into a firefighting role, and figuring out how to position the business and get through it. I guess that was one part, was having something very big and realizing that everybody's looking to the financial organization to help understand what is this and what do we do, and how do we prioritize. The second part of it was, I think one of the things I learned was the need to kind of communicate with people who may not be financially minded, or think about, like, I look at a set of financial statements and immediately they start to speak to me and tell me a story, and I don't understand why everybody else can't see the same story. Don't you see what's happening here? There's margin compression, or there's financing challenges coming ahead. Don't you see this? And a lot of people don't. And so how do you talk to people to help them understand? Because I think everybody wants to understand how their business is doing. And so your question reminded me of, like, so how do you communicate to maybe an aircraft mechanic about why are we doing what we're doing after growing for so many years? Why are we selling airplanes? Why are we cutting pay? Why are we cutting flights? I don't understand. And the example that I know we used in some of our employee meetings was, they couldn't understand, the hundreds of millions of dollars in fuel that you were now buying. But we kind of took the problem and talked to them in terms of their own personal finances. So we'll think about it this way. Your mortgage or your rent payment typically is about 25% of your take-home pay. That's what fuel was to an airline. Let me just tell you what's happened. Our rent has been going up, and over the last 6 months, our mortgage has doubled. What would your life be like if your mortgage doubled in 6 months? Oh, and you see everybody's eyes get wide. And then he said, okay, well, now let me tell you this. The economy is slowing down. And so, now let me tell you that you've gotten a 10% pay cut. How does that affect, what would you do personally? And people say, well, I'd probably go try and get a second job. I'd look for other ways to make money. I'd cut expenses out that I didn't think I really needed. And then all of a sudden people began to understand. And so I think that is one of the things that I try and carry around is, do other people understand? And can you speak to people so they can understand the financial situation, perhaps without having to walk them through a cash flow statement? So
I love that, man. I love that. So you found a way to be able to speak Greek to people that understand Greek. I'm a converted CPA, and reading financial statements, I think you probably say people like you and me, we're nerds, we can read financial statements, but I love the fact that you were able to translate it to people in the way that they could understand it. And isn't it more important to make progress with folks when they can understand? And I love your story about how you did that. I'm curious, you're in the restaurant business now, and I think I told you my personal story about my first fancy restaurant in America when I came over here. Reward for accomplishing a sales goal was the reward of being able to be invited to go experience the Ruth Chris experience. And obviously, as a new foreigner, I had no idea what these guys were talking about. But quickly after I heard the sizzle of that steak, that I realized why America loves Ruth Chris. But you're translating over from the airline industry to the restaurant industry. It's an interesting transition. How's that been for you? And was there any resemblances between the industries?
There's actually a lot, and I think I used some of my marketing skills to help get the job. And so I was very lucky. AirTran, we survived the fuel crisis. We went from having the worst year we ever had to having the best year we'd ever had the following year.
Wow.
And, we were helped by the fact that fuel prices came back down, and we had, in the front of the recession, I shared with people, I remember at an investor conference, that we were very lucky that we had the fuel spike when we did. And the panelist kind of scratched his head and looked at me like, what do you mean? I said, well, we got to go first. We could go raise money before everybody showed up. We could sell planes when other parts of the world were still buying things. If we came into it late, it would have been a lot harder. And so I was lucky enough, I had a recruiter call me the week the deal got announced that Southwest was now buying this company. What are you doing next? And I came in to have dinner with the chairman of the CEO and chairman of the company, and he asked me a similar question. How do you see, do you think there's any crossover here? And I said, I think they're very similar. And he kind of laughed again and turned his head and said, really, I want to hear this, and grabbed a glass of wine. And I said, well, let's think about it. We're all fighting for what's left over at the end of the month. Very few people need to get on an airplane. Very few people need to eat a fancy steakhouse dinner. We're fighting for, what do you want to do with your disposable income to make you happy? I used to tell people they should go take a trip or visit their family. Now I'm thinking, maybe they should take a mini vacation and go to Ruth's Chris and have a steak and a nice bottle of wine. And won't that make you happy? He's like, okay. I said, well, we have a fixed amount of space, whether it's an airline or whether it's a restaurant. Now we're going to put seats in it. And now we're going to try and fill the seats with people who are going to pay us to sit in these seats. So we need to measure how effective are we, what percentage of the seats are full, and then what prices are people paying. So that's kind of similar. You think about, we both have reservation systems. And so you keep track of your customers and what are you doing with that data and how are you harnessing that information. That is similar. We both have, our largest cost is labor, and it's segmented. In the airlines, it's, above wing, below wing, in the airport, and then corporate. For a restaurant, it's, what they would call the front of the house, or the heart of the house, then the kitchen, and then management and corporate. You have, after labor, your next biggest cost is a commodity. And in airlines, it's fuel. And in a restaurant now, I care about the price of cows. And so it's an asset class, though. It's changed in the last 10 years. It's not just supply and demand anymore. You're competing with financial investors, and you need to think about it, not just supply and demand anymore, but also in terms of, well, how is this being viewed as a commodity? Is there a financial motivation to what's happening to the prices? So those are, I could keep going, but I don't want to bore you with all those kind of stories. But I think there's a lot of similarities, and it's kind of funny as I've gotten to get to know other people around the industry. I found there's been several other airline executives that have crossed over into the restaurant business, and I think it's the airlines, certainly it's not the most profitable business in the world, but you have to be smart and work hard, and it's complicated, and those are good skills to have anywhere.
That's a fascinating story. I can see the resemblances now. I couldn't see it before. So it's interesting that you laid it out for us like that. I really appreciate it. We're talking about how you were relating with a person that was, in the airline industry, and just explaining the complicated stuff easier. And just listening to you, I can see that relationships is very important to you. What kind of relationships would you say were most impactful to you in the development of your career, your development as a senior executive? Who comes to mind that has been most forming, and in what way have they been forming for you?
Oh gosh, that's a really interesting question. Two people really jump to mind. One of them was one of my supervisors when I worked at U.S. Airways in the pricing department, and him and I really clicked, and he kind of brought me under his wing and helped mentor me at a young point in my career. And we're still good friends, personal friends today. We both ended up coming to AirTran. We ended up being peers. He ran all the marketing and pricing and scheduling, and I ended up on the finance side. So we spent probably 15 years together. But what he did for me was he helped me. I had some skills in terms of computers and data, and he saw in me the one that I could help him answer questions. And as an executive, you're always looking to try, you have questions, or I wonder, or what is this? And, I think he saw in me that I could help him. Like, I was curious, and I like, well, we could go look at this, and if you look at it this way, and this might answer that question, or maybe this and something else will help answer that question. And the two of us formed a great partnership, and he kind of taught me how to read the P&L. This is before I had my MBA, what people are going to think about, what are the questions that come around. And then I was always very eager to run off and say, well, let me show you how I can help answer those questions. So Kevin Healy was the gentleman, and I'm grateful to Kevin for the opportunities he gave me, and I'm thrilled to call him a friend today. The other person that really comes to mind is our current executive chairman at Ruth's Hospitality Group, who was the CEO, who sat with me and drank a glass of wine with me while we talked about hooking our trains together and working together at Ruth's. And he had a really different philosophy than I had probably experienced ever in my career. And so the airlines is hard charging, your hair's on fire every day. There's always a crisis. There's always something going on. And I remember one day early on in my time at Ruth, I was working later in the office, and he likes to come down and sit in your office, and he might sit there for 2 hours and just want to talk. And I was working on something. He's like, what are you working on? He's like, why are you working on a spreadsheet? You're my CFO. And I said, well, there's not enough people, and I have some questions, and I can do this myself. And I'm, there's things that I can't do that I'm giving to other people. And he said to me, and this really kind of stuck with me. He said, I don't mind seeing your work, but I didn't hire you to produce work for me. I hired you because I want you to think. And so are you giving yourself enough time to think and step back from the business? And that was like, made my head explode. Like, what, everyone else, it's been work, and keep moving forward and keep driving. And so Mike O'Donnell is probably the second person that I would say, and helped me like kind of take a breath in my career and like, oh, think, that's interesting, and ask questions and help bring others around it. And if I come back to kind of Kevin Healy, it's my turn to like ask questions and have other people bring answers and help them learn to think more broadly around the business. And Mike did that, and he introduced some books that he would have our executive team read as a group, which was something I had never experienced. 20 executives every week coming in to talk about the next chapter in a book. And it really, I think, fostered the thinking part of business, which sometimes we get too caught up in the tactics of what we're trying to do. So those are a long answer to your short question. But
that's very cool, Arne. That's very cool. Where I met you the first time was at a Ruth Chris, and it was here in Winter Park in Orlando.
Yeah.
And it was at an event that was sponsored for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We have a great friend in common, Shannon Ellswick, who was on the board. Mm-hmm. And, how does a guy like you, a CFO, get involved with a ministry or an organization like Big Brothers Big Sisters? What was it for you that said, this is a place where I'd like to help?
Oh, that's easy. That's an easy question. So it started, my involvement with Big Brother started in my early 20s. And so right after I got out of college, and it was, as I look back on it, it was kind of a crazy time in my life to get involved. But my wife and I were I think we were engaged to be married or getting ready to be engaged, but we were fairly mature in our relationship. We were living outside of Washington, D.C., and I decided to sign up to volunteer to be a big brother. At that time, I was getting ready to get married. I was working very hard on my career. I had started going back to graduate school at night, so I was working full time. I had just gotten married, or was getting ready to get married and start our family, and going to school and trying to work at a Fortune 500 company and advance my career. And I decided that in my spare time, I'm going to go mentor a youth who doesn't have a father in his life. And I did that because I felt very strongly about it from my own personal experience. My father died when I was, I guess, about 7 years old. And I experienced about 4 years there, kind of second through sixth grade, where I didn't have a father around. My mom ended up remarrying. I ended up becoming extremely close with my stepfather. I call him my dad. And but I felt, during those formative years, like, it was like a bit of a wound. It hurt. You think about like things you take for granted, like somebody to throw a baseball with. Like, I was on a baseball team, but my mom couldn't throw baseballs with me in the backyard. I put a tire against the side of the house and ended up breaking her dining room window. I was lucky enough to have neighbors, and I've gone back and thanked a lot of the people that have, they stepped up and they helped me. I think I might have told the story. I use this a lot of big brothers. I was in Cub Scouts, and they give you the Pinewood Derby block of wood to build a car. And shockingly, most dads help their young sons build their cars so that they go fast, and help put graphite on the wheels and everything else. I didn't have that person. I remember sitting on the back stoop of my mom's house whittling my car with a kitchen knife, with a paring knife. And my car was not attractive, and it got stuck on the track. It couldn't even make it to the finish line. And it's heartbreaking as a kid because everyone's last.
Sure.
And so I kind of carried that around, that when I get to be an adult, I want to give back. And what I think you've said it before, what makes your heart cry? And it's kids who have a tough situation. They don't have that positive role model in their life. And so how do you help them achieve their potential? How do you, give them the confidence to go forward? So I started in my 20s. When I moved to Florida, it actually worked out well. My little brother was getting ready to graduate high school, so it was kind of a natural, you age out of the program at 18. And then I kind of took a hiatus. And then at AirTran, they asked us to start getting involved with local nonprofits, and I quickly knew who I wanted to go spend my time with, and I picked up the phone and put a call to the local chapter of Big Brothers Big Sisters. And now they can't get rid of me. It's been 10 years, and I probably should step down. So
that's fantastic. It's fantastic. I find often, even in my world, and a lot of folks that we work with, is that a lot of times our own passions is in the center of our own pain. And how does it feel for you to be able to, how does it make you feel to step out of a board meeting versus stepping out of a meeting with a person, a child, a young person that you're encouraging?
Oh, I think it's, they're both, like, look, there's nothing better than coming out of a good, successful board meeting. Man, that went well. And at the same standpoint, when I'm also involved with, so now I have 3 sons, and I'm trying very hard to be the best dad I can to them. And my youngest son is in Boy Scouts. And so now I'm also involved as an assistant scoutmaster in his Boy Scout troop. And I love spending time with young adults and helping them realize that they can do whatever they really want to do, and give them the confidence to, I like to joke with them. I said, a lot of us are still trying to figure out what we want to be when we grow up. And none of us knew, and your parents didn't know, and they're still trying to figure it out. And just go try. And, it's tremendously rewarding to see kids. And I think particularly, I see it probably more in the Boy Scout organization, where they advance and watch them transform. With Big Brothers today, I don't really get to see, the evolution of individual cases. I'm more trying to help provide governance and leadership. But in the Boy Scouts, you do see kids, and that they, absolutely transform themselves from shy and being, fearful to being leaders, and, that they can have self-confidence and also skills that I think, and I wish I had continued with Boy Scouts. I think it would have been a great baseline to skills to take into college and adulthood.
You're saying a wonderful amount of things here together. And if you and I were to quickly go back and forth and we were to brainstorm quick and summarize your story in a way that we are encouraging a person like yourself, a successful business owner, a successful executive, maybe a successful professional, about this transition from what I call success to significance, the transition to go from me to we, essentially, where you're looking and saying, maybe it is a function that you're not completely fulfilled in life. You're experiencing success. You're wondering if there's something more than success, or there's just an internal drive, or actually, like you said, a company or somebody comes around side you and say, hey, have you thought about giving back and where you want to give back? I want to pause on a few things that you said that was very, very insightful to me. One is you said essentially just go do it. So I want to encourage the listeners with this question. Hey, who do you cry for? And do you think it's important for you to go make an impact of your life and use your platform to be able to do so? And I heard you say a few things. You said, look, I'm a CFO today. I'm a chief executive. And maybe I'm not the guy that is having these conversations with the boys on a one-on-one basis. I'm providing leadership because I'm using my skills as a leader to provide leadership for this organization. But I'm tied to the organization because I've figured out where my pain lies, and it lies inside of my story. And so as we talk about how can we encourage others, we would say and encourage them to say, look, just go do this. It's okay to fail at it if you need to and want to, but just fail forward. Figure out where your pain lies, as far as, and a lot of times is embedded in your story. So if my volunteering or giving back is in line with my passions, it comes alive, doesn't it?
It does. I think and I joke when I interview candidates, and I'm usually the last stop for someone in our department. They have to come spend an hour with me. And I joke, I typically ask the same kind of questions, and it's very little technical, and it's more about the person, who they are, where did they come from, tell me about your parents, what did your parents do? But I think one of the hardest questions that I ask people, and I joke, I said, I know there's probably somewhere out on the internet, somebody's starting to collect, here's what the person asks you during an interview, but I don't have seen anything yet. So, but the one question that I ask people is, tell me what gives you satisfaction personally. And it's like the hardest curveball you would think you ever gave someone. And they're like, what do you mean? I go, okay, well, let me ask this. And I stole this from one of my coworkers he's rephrased the question. Today was not a work day, but it was a good day. What happened? And once they answer, and then I'll ask them, tell me about what gives you satisfaction professionally. Everyone tries to take it back to work. Let me tell you about my skills and what I like doing and how hard I like to work. I'm like, no. Tell me about what gives you personal satisfaction. And the reason I do that is in part around kind of your question on giving back. Like, it took me a long time to figure out that you shouldn't be trying to fill all your satisfaction from work. And too often we do. And I really don't want to hire somebody who all their satisfaction comes from work, because I know we're going to disappoint you. And that I want there to be a balance, and that, work should give you satisfaction and there should be reward in that. But I'd also like to know that you have a good sense of self and what you want to do, and what makes you happy. Because if you're happy, you could be very successful at work, but if it's not going well at home, and I ask the same question, what gives you frustration personally? And you'll hear it's like, oh, it's when the house is a mess and I don't help, and my wife or my spouse is doing more and I don't get to spend time with my kids, and that's what a bad day at home looks like. So I think that's a real challenge, and I think you fight it every day. Is how do you give yourself satisfaction and try not to make it all come from work?
I love it. So I'm going to turn it on you then. Here's the question. Hey, Arne, what's giving you satisfaction?
I look a lot of places. Mike O'Donnell, who I talked about before, asked me once, and it's the same question, what do you want your legacy to be? And my answer came back. And work was a smaller piece. The legacy you actually leave behind I think is your children, right? It's when you're gone. I mean, whether we build 3 to 5 restaurants a year, or 10 to 15 restaurants a year, 5 years from now, 5 years from now, people will forget. It won't matter. It's important today. It's achieving your financial goals are important, but it's not. To me, I think what's changed for me is it's not the most important thing anymore. It starts with, I think, do you have a relationship with God? Are you a good son? Are you a good, are you a good father, a good husband? Are you a good friend? And then at the end, it's, oh yeah, and you know what? He just had a knack for business. He made it fun. And so I love business success. I love, helping work with other people and finding success. That gives me satisfaction, but trying to do the best we can to have fun along the way. It's one of the probably Arneisms that the Boy Scout troop is tired of hearing me say, that, they'll talk about, oh, we're planning for a canoe trip and da-da-da-da, and here's the details, be at the church by, 6 o'clock Saturday morning, here's what you need to have, and go online for this. And then I'd raise my hand and say, well, who's going to bring the fun? Who's in charge of bringing the fun? And
I like that.
And the answer is, none of the adults are packing fun for you. You want to have fun, you got to help bring it yourself, and spend some time thinking about that. What are you doing to bring the fun? And I think that's true at work too. Like I could do more. My team, I hope they don't find this, they'll say, like, I wish you brought more fun to work, giving me more assignments.
Arne, if somebody asked me the same question, another way of asking it is like, hey, if you died and you look back and you look at your tombstone, what would you want people to write on that tombstone? Another way of looking at the legacy question. And mine would be, here lies a guy that has figured out how to surround himself with amazing people. And just visiting with you today on our webcast here has certainly proved me to be very satisfied in that. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. You're truly, in my lens and in our organization, an amazing guy. And we measure amazing people when they transition from success to significance, when they move what I call turn the M upside down. We move from me to we. And I'm finding, just the way you're describing, that a lot of folks are experiencing significantly more fun and fulfillment. Even the job and what they do, but they become even better and better and better at it. And they continue to use their platforms to make an impact. And it is fun and fulfilling for themselves. And you are a great example of that. So thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. Keep on doing what you're doing, my friend. And may you go from strength to strength. I hope great things are happening with Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And we certainly are looking forward to supporting and seeing you at the golf tournament. And thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Hilgard.
Thank you for watching the Life Wealth Group YouTube channel. We hope you found this video informative. If you have any specific questions as to what you heard today, don't hesitate to reach out to us for a complimentary phone call or meeting in person. Also, don't forget to subscribe.